Hey the people, how you doing? Well, it is that time finally. The time for the complete comparison between these two flagships. Now, I know some of you must think, well, the S22 Ultra is about 50% more expensive compared to the X80 Pro. That is a huge price gap, obviously, and for some people, it almost makes the S22 Ultra way too expensive. But let's just say you have the amount of money for the S22 Ultra, but then you're also considering the X80 Pro. Now the real question arises is that, is the S22 Ultra going to offer you enough for that amount of money? Now that's the question that shall get answered for you. This comparison also holds something that I would consider personally important because, well, I stated this back when I reviewed the X80 Pro as well. Link to that is in the description, but point is that for me, when I'm not actively reviewing a smartphone, I always used the S22 Ultra. Last year I used the S21 Ultra throughout, and well, it's a very comfortable device. Obviously, I've really gotten used to it. I know the UI, I know how it works, I know how the camera works, everything, all that. And I mean, it's a great device, no doubt about it. I mean, it costs a ton, so it should be great, right? And it is. But lately I have been wanting to switch over to a different flagship, and I think the X80 Pro stands a very fair chance here. So we'll get into that later. First, let's get the real differences out the way. So initially, the design, let's just say the S22 Ultra is sort of bland, I guess. I mean, it works. It's a good design, it's got the matte finish, and it has the square off look that many Note lovers really like. And I mean, personally, it looks amazing because of that. It looks very unique in a manner of speaking. But then we have the X80 Pro, which I guess it's fine. It doesn't look particularly better, especially with the camera module. On one hand, we have simplicity on the S22 Ultra, and here it's a little bit more boisterous, a little bit more out there, but it's not as refined as, let's just say, what we had last year from the X70 Pro Plus either. The overall design, I would have to go for the X80 Pro, because for most people, I don't think they're gonna care about how the square of edges look. For a lot of people, it's going to end up being this rounded edge that makes it easier to hold. It's more comfortable, and for that reason, I think the X80 Pro takes it. And well, that is not all, because the X80 Pro's finish is a good bit better, both the way it feels and also functionally compared to the S22 Ultra, because while on one hand the S22 Ultra's matte finish, it feels good and is fingerprint resistant to a certain degree, of course, this thing is fingerprint immune. And if you try it out with your hands in maybe one of the showrooms or something like that, you'll notice it immediately. Like the difference, the way it feels in your hand, the X80 Pro wins by a mile in that regard. So overall, I do think most people will enjoy the design of the X80 Pro. Now moving on to display. Well, this part, it's close. It's very close on both sides, surprisingly so, because the only real difference is in the brightness, the maximum brightness that is. So on one hand, we have the S22 Ultra, which, as I've stated multiple times already, it has the best looking display on any smartphone thus far. But my question is that just 200 nits of brightness which you're only going to notice in the brightest sunlight, like high noon, and you're trying to use a camera, and that's when you're really going to notice that the S22 Ultra looks a little bit more clear and you can see slightly better compared to the X80 Pro. I've used these in bright sunlight, so I know how they look. Maybe for some people that brightness could be a game changer, maybe that's what you need. But I don't think for most people you're going to be disappointed with the X80 Pro at 1500 nits of peak brightness. It is still plenty, it is still very bright right there. And then of course there's the regular stuff, there's obviously amazing content consumption on both, whether it's standard dynamic range content like YouTube, or if you want to watch Netflix with HDR, Amazon Prime, all that jazz, it all works really well on both. And it just looks immaculate on both, as you'd expect. As for the speaker situation, well, the S22 Ultra is better. Plain and simple, it has a richer feel from the speakers. So, display overall, it is close. The S22 Ultra definitely wins, and with the speakers, it's a similar story. But what you gotta keep in mind is whether or not that difference is really going to come into play, and whether or not, you know, that extra bit of brightness is really going to help you out when you're using either of these devices. I mean, if it does, then sure, the S22 Ultra is already a better pick for you, but if it doesn't, then I guess the X80 Pro still stands a fair chance. And well, there's all the other miscellaneous stuff, you know, the performance is basically similar across the board, and we have the same chipset, so the overall power is going to be good as well. And I do understand that some people do not really enjoy the FunTouch OS on the Vivo X80 Pro. Personally, I really like FunTouch OS. I think it's very snappy, it works really well, and well, the customization on FunTouch OS, it almost surpasses the S22 Ultra. If anything, I would say both have incredibly good and equally amazing customization. Now, with that in mind, obviously some people do prefer One UI. Personally, like if I really had to pick one, I would go for One UI as well. Like Samsung's take on operating system, it really is a home run. And well, the X80 Pro, for me at least, it comes really close, and I'm honestly not sure what it is that people find to be so bad about FunTouch OS. Let me know in the comments what exactly you feel isn't quite as good, because for me it's been a near flawless experience. And then of course there's the battery, and honestly it's almost a negligible difference, because both can give you really long battery life. Both can easily go up to, I believe it's 6 to 6.5 hours, like unquestionably, and when you're using the cameras then maybe like 6 hours, 6 hours 15, that sort of time. So you're gonna have plenty of battery to last you throughout an entire day of medium to heavy usage. That's basically the kind of usage that I have. So for me, neither phones are disappointing in battery life, so I don't think it's gonna be a problem for either. But the real place where I think the biggest differences are going to emerge is got to be the cameras. And well, that's where things get really interesting. So first and foremost, the photography on both phones. Now, for me, I love the way the X80 Pro's photography comes out. You know, the colors, the contrast, it really speaks to me. And I know that sort of thing can be very much based on personal preference, so I would highly recommend you guys check out the camera comparison that I did between these two. Both the photography and the videography, then you can get a complete idea as to which one is better for you. If you really want natural photos, and that is all you care about, like you want your photos to look exactly like they do when you're taking them, well then, the X80 Pro, I think it's one of the only devices that can provide you with that level of natural colors and contrast. And we can do that with Zeiss Natural Colors. It is a very simple toggle that you can just click in the photo mode, and it stays on, and I have kept it switched on throughout the entire time that I've used the X80 Pro, except for certain camera comparisons where I wanted to show the difference. But point is that the S22 Ultra, it can give you some almost Instagram ready photos, but natural realistic photographs, it really is something that the X80 Pro excels at. And it is something that upon looking at the X80's photos, I've really found myself inclined towards it, because usually what happens is when you have this sort of a natural look or natural mode, usually all you get is a desaturated image. That is really not the case on the X80 Pro. Sometimes, like occasionally, very occasionally, the X80 Pro will desaturate, but more often than not, it is going to be an amazing photograph that you get. Now, it's a very similar story with selfies as well. Selfie camera on the X80 Pro, it's really good. I think it's about as good as the S22 Ultra. Now, it is a little bit more inconsistent compared to the S22 Ultra, but for the most part, it does a really good job. For portraits, it's an interesting situation. So, personally, I really like using Zeiss planar portraits. It is one of the portrait, well, you could call them filters, but honestly, they are a little bit more than that. I do like the way the processing works with Zeiss planar portrait mode turned on the X80 Pro. And well, on the S22 Ultra you obviously do not have any such option. There are some filters that you can use, but they look a little too weird in my opinion, so I don't really turn that on. On the X80 Pro, however, the planar portraits, I'm a huge fan of them. They give really high contrast, they give slightly higher brightness to your face, not too much, it doesn't look weird, and honestly, I love the way that Zeiss planar portrait works. But there is a catch. It doesn't work really well with backlit situations, and that has been a problem on the X80 Pro. If you want backlit situations and if you want to take portrait mode photos in those situations, then without question just turn off planar portraits and you're gonna get far better results. And that goes for night mode portraits as well. And honestly, the X80 Pro might be the only flagships, at least one of the only flagships that I've ever used, which can stack up against the S22 Ultra when it comes to night mode portraits. Now, I'm not sure how many people are actually excited about night mode portraits, but personally, it is one of the best that I've seen on any smartphone when it comes to these two. Now, honestly, if I had to pick one, I do like the way the X80 Pro looks. It's very stylized and the bokeh in the background looks amazing on the X80, so for me, portraits are better on the X80 Pro. Personal preference here. But yeah, I think at this point you've seen a few samples already and you guys can decide for yourself which of these is going to end up being better for you, which style you like, which one's skin tones you prefer, which one's vibrance you prefer, all that good stuff. But do keep in mind that little caveat with the X80 Pro. A night mode on the other hand, well, contrary to the natural stuff that we were talking about that I really liked about the X80 Pro, the night mode ends up being very processed. On one hand, that can be a very good thing because if you think about it, a lot of processing means that you can get immaculate night shots more often than not. That is one of the biggest strengths of the X80 Pro. You end up getting some photos that are really bright, have amazing dynamic range, the contrast is still very well maintained despite how much detail you can still see in the shadows. And it really is amazing. The noise reduction is also just fantastic. And by the way, if you do not like blue night skies, turn off enhanced night sky in the settings. It was one of the things that was pointed out to me in the comments back in one of the videos, and dear god, am I thankful to that guy. Now the S22's night mode is slightly different. It gives you more contrast and more often than not it looks more technically natural in terms of the exposure compared to the X80 Pro, but the quality of the images from the X80 Pro's night mode, it really rivals the S22 Ultra. So photography wise, I don't think there is enough of a difference to say that one of these phones is decidedly better than the other. But of course, personal preference plays a huge role. If you don't care about natural colors, if you don't care about, I don't know, the planar portrait situation or the slightly more processed night mode, and instead what you really want is a camera with extreme versatility, like 10x zoom on this is insane. So yeah, if that's what you want, then the S22 Ultra is a no-brainer choice. But if the stuff I said and the samples I showed you, they intrigue you, the X80 Pro is going to serve you very well. So with all of that in mind, videography, it is unquestionably better on the S22 Ultra. That is honestly the big caveat with the X80 Pro. Unquestionably the one area where it sort of lacks. Now personally, I don't take a lot of videos, other than the video comparisons that I do, but of course, I completely understand that videography can be a crucial part of your camera usage. A lot of people take a ton of video, maybe even more than photos, and for them, unquestionably, the S22 Ultra is basically like the best Android flagship for videos. Like, it's the only phone that can really compare against the iPhone 13 Pro, right? So, if you think about that, then there's really nothing else that can compare to the S22 Ultra. And then, if you really wanted video, I doubt you'd actually even be considering the X80 Pro, because if you've seen any of my camera comparisons, at least the video comparisons with the X80 Pro, you'd know that videography isn't exactly something that it excels at. So overall, cameras encompassing both the photos and videos from both phones, for me personally, I would say the X80 Pro is better for me because I don't take a lot of videos. And it's also because, well, how do I put this? The X80 Pro is a lot more enjoyable in terms of a camera. especially in terms of a photography camera. There's a lot more customization, there's a lot more options to choose from. Now, if that is not something you care about, again, the S22 Ultra obviously is the one to go for if you want the most balanced experience. That's probably why the S22 Ultra costs so much, because it gives you amazing photography and amazing videography. But you know, the one thing that the S22 Ultra has that no other smartphone provides at this very moment, it is this S Pen. And I know for a fact that a lot of people live and die for the S Pen. I mean, it is an amazing feature. It works extremely well. It's very accurate, and I mean, I use it for a lot of stuff. I've used it for sketching, I've used it for even a little bit of the photo editing for the thumbnails that you see, and well, essentially it's an amazing feature, unquestionably so. But you know, lately I haven't been using it as much, but I mean, that's a personal thing. For me at least, the S Pen actually makes the S22 Ultra worth it. I think it's a feature that if you really want to use it, there's really nothing else out there. So the price for the S22 Ultra is actually sort of justified, in a manner of speaking, of course. I mean, if you really think about it, the X80 Pro also has this insane fingerprint scanner. I know I should have mentioned this in the display section, but well, this fingerprint scanner, it is by far the best, the fastest, and the most accurate one that I've ever used in my entire life. Because, I mean, the tiny little fingerprint scanner on the S22 Ultra, I mean, it doesn't even count if you really think about it. The X80 Pro, for what it's worth, for, you know, the design it has, the content consumption it provides, and the camera experience, especially with the photography, I think it's going to be a better choice based on price alone, because it is so much less expensive. I mean, you can get a lot of stuff for the amount of money that you're not spending with the X80 Pro. So I do hope that answers your question. I mean, yes, it does depend on personal usage and the kind of stuff that you prefer and all that jazz, but I think at this point you should have a very clear idea of what it is you can get from both of these devices and whether or not the stuff that you get are going to be worth your while. So with that in mind, I shall be going forward with the X80 Pro, and maybe, I don't know, at some point I might end up switching back because I'm missing the S Pen. Who knows? But until that happens, well, I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. It has been definitely something that I've had to think about quite a lot. So, drop a like if you enjoyed it, definitely hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll be seeing you guys later. Cheers!